Whenever I start one of these challenge videos, it usually comes from either a commenter or a list I keep on my phone. But sometimes when I'm just sitting alone in my room trying to think of something stupid that I could do, I come up with something that's so outrageously out on left field that I think that I have to do this right now. This was one of those runs, so today we aim to find out, can you beat Fallout 3 as Santa Claus? Now, the concept for this one, hear me out, is a little out there. I have to give presents to everybody who is good, and I have to punish anyone who is bad. Fairly simple, but it ended up being one of my favorite challenges ever. Like I said, a little weird, but all in all it's pretty simple, so let's start the run. There are a couple more rules that'll come up later, but I'll explain them when it's actually necessary. Starting up the game, the Great Kringle is born, and I gave him a fitting name. Character creation was pretty easy, as I just needed to make an old man with a beard. Fairly simple. Flashing forward a bit, I need to assign my special stats, and for that I just focused mainly on endurance and strength, as well as intelligence and charisma. I kept agility at a flat 1 because, well, he's fat and fat people can't really move. Last I checked at any rate. Jumping ahead a bit more, I was at my 10th birthday party and given the Pip-Boy. I got a handful of items here including the BB gun, the sweet roll, and the Grognak comic. Really, the only useful one was the Grognak comic, as although I can use the BB gun because I am not going to be using any weapon restrictions on this, the BB gun obviously isn't my first choice in weapon. Something I noticed here was that none of the residents were making eye contact with my character, which I thought was a little weird, but as soon as I entered the basement I understood why, as I cast my eyes on the horror that was my character. Wanting to jump out of this phase of my life as soon as possible, I shot the rad roach and moved on to the goat test. Before I started and cheated on the test, I beat up Butch, and I didn't stop when he ran away. No, I continued until he was lying on the ground unconscious. For my tag skills, I took repair for toy making and guns for bone breaking. I also took sneak so I could sneak into people's houses and whatnot. Now obviously it's time for the Great Escape. With a high strength stat, my baseball bat actually outpaces the 10mm pistol, and for some reason I would refuse to use a pistol anyways, so the baseball bat ended up being my weapon of choice. I made sure to help Butch with his mommy issues before making my way to the officers. I decided to kill every officer except Gomez because he is the only nice one, and that means that I'd spare him. The other ones on the other hand did not have such a nice fate. I tried to save the 2 vault dwellers that were running away, but sadly even though I did take out the gunners that were supposed to take them out, they still sort of keeled over. There's nothing I could do about that, I'm afraid, so I just moved on to the next section of the vault. This is obviously where you encounter the Overseer and Officer Mac. I took out Officer Mac as the Overseer watched, as he doesn't attack you until you attack him, and when Mac was dead I just turned on him. Such naughtiness isn't tolerated in a world that I'm in, so I beat his brains out and left him on the floor to rot. And then took his passcode to a secret tunnel, walked through, letting me escape the vault. Now out in the Great Green Wasteland, I was a good little Claus and made my way to Megaton. On my way there, I decided to pick a fight with an Eyebot, which was more of a mistake than I thought. Sure, I was able to kill it very quickly, but the resulting explosion ended up spaghettiing me back to the vault entrance, so that was my first death of this run. On my second attempt, I did not attack the Eyebot on my way to Megaton and instead just entered the town, where I immediately talked to Sheriff Mayer in order to disarm the bomb. I needed to take some mentats in order to pass the skill check, but luckily I picked some up in the Overseer's room, so I was all good there. Despite the fact I could just run to Smith Casey's garage right now, I decided I might as well jump through all the hoops while I'm here, and talk to Moriarty so I could get the information. He just sent me to deal with Silver so I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, by which I mean I could kill Silver and take all her caps. You see, this is why you don't do drugs. I assure you, this man knows where you live, and knows if you did. Ignoring the fact that I just killed Silver even though I took some mentats earlier, I went back to Megaton to report back to Moriarty. I really wanted to take him out as well, as he is extremely cruel to anyone and everything around him. Sadly, if I did, I would lower my karma, and for the entirety of this run, I want to stay in good karma, and I believe lowering my karma by that would just set me up for failure later. Besides, killing Moriarty would anger the entirety of Megaton, which is something I don't want to do right now as I still have quests to do there. For now, I just ran away from my problems like a real man, and instead made my way to Tenpenny Tower so I could sort out the situation there. I thought a bit about who I should side with, but ultimately decided to help the ghouls. Technically, in my situation right now, both sides are in the wrong because A, the people of Tenpenny Tower were not very kind when it came to sharing their stuff, and B, the ghouls threaten violence. Both of these things warrant me to kill all of them, but I'm not going to do that as this is not a genocide run. Instead, I just took out everybody in Tenpenny Tower, and it was surprisingly easy. Sure, the guards are in some form of combat armor, as well as all using auto rifles, but because of my high strength stat, I'm actually able to cripple them pretty easily with the baseball bat, which made killing them a cakewalk. The last person standing in the tower ended up being Tenpenny himself, so I just unloaded a clip from an AR into his stomach before taking his clothes. Yes, this was the real reason I sided with the ghouls. I needed some fashion that fit the run, and I decided this would be the best one. If you haven't noticed, this isn't going to be the kind of run where I use speech checks and good karma to get out of situations. Ne'er-do-wells and hooligans are getting hot lead, not cool this year. Never mind that for a bit, right now I'm going to go hand out some presents, by which I mean I'm going to help some people in good karma. I decided to start with Moira Brown in the Wasteland Survival Guide, as she is, as I mentioned, in good karma, and it makes a nice early game quest. I'm not going to be doing the entire thing, mind you, because it's extremely long, but I will be doing the first chapter. Now I could lie and pass a speech check in order to finish the first quest, but I'm not about that this run, so I was off to the Super Duper Mart to start killing some raiders. While I was there, I ran into that kid that gives you the those quest, and I decided to pick it up as I might as well do that later. Now you may think I was a bit cruel by yelling at him to send him away, but in reality I was just trying to get him out of the way so he didn't have to watch the horrors that were about to unfold in front of his very eyes. There's a scripted event outside the Super Duper Mart where you'll encounter your first Talon Company mercs. I'm of course in good karma right now, so that means they're after me. Well, it's nothing a few 5.56 rounds won't fix, so I just unloaded a few magazines into them and was on my way. The raiders inside were not worth the ammo, so I just used a mixture of a Chinese pistol and a hunting rifle to take them out. Their reinforcements were a bit more trouble, especially since they had explosives, but they weren't all that tanky, and by now I had a hunting rifle in pretty good condition, so I was able to take them out very quickly. Inside the mart, I made sure to pick up both the food and the medicine and return them all to Moira. After this, I of course have to go to Minefield and deal with all that crap, but first I decided to do the next quest and just irradiate myself really bad. Now that I had a few extra limbs, I returned to Moira, received some extra Radaway and Radex, and made my way to Minefield finally. Now, something I neglected to mention at the beginning of this run is that my computer really does not like Fallout 3. Now, when I say that, I mean it really doesn't. Case in point, when I was making my way to Minefield, I had to pass by some pretty populated areas that were full of raiders, which made me lag like crazy. There was literally nothing I could do about it, and I'm sorry if the recordings are a bit choppy, but I did my best to cut those kind of things out in editing. Phase Santa decided to appear for a little bit as I sniped a couple of the raiders, but the thing about bullets in Fallout 3 is they just sometimes decide not to exist, which meant that the sniper wasn't all that effective. Anyways, enough of that for now. I made my way back to Minefield where I outsniped the sniper without a sniper, and picked up a landmine. This was the last quest I was going to do for Moira because I do not want to go through the entirety of Wasteland Survival Guide, so I can actually beat the game in a reasonable time limit. Look at me making it sound like I went and did the main story. Actually, no, I decided now I'd go do those quests for that one kid. While I was making my way there, I decided to pick up dog meat because I don't really have any rules against companions, so I figured I might as well. This ended up being a mistake, not for me, but for dog meat, as when I arrived at Grey Ditch, I started lagging because any place with buildings in Fallout 3 tends to make me lag. For some reason, Grey Ditch was by far one of the worst areas here, and I actually couldn't even see what was going on. During this time, the ants somehow, and I do want to stress somehow, managed to kill dog meat. I'm not exactly sure how they did it, as some of the companions in this game have absolutely ridiculous stats, and can honestly beat the game without you. But yes, the ants somehow managed to kill dog meat. I only owned him for a whopping 5 minutes, so I wasn't too heartbroken, but I still wanted to complete the quest. As I mentioned earlier, the fire ants here can turn me into Crispy Kringle pretty quickly, so I decided just to speed through as many sections as I could, avoiding the ants where I went. This quest is fairly basic: inform a kid that their dad's food, and then make your way into a tunnel to go kill some ants. Once you start killing the ants, you can't really stop, as they drop fire ant nectar, which gives you a reduction on fire damage, which basically means that after you kill one, the rest become pretty trivial. I ended up using my baseball bat pretty much throughout all of this, simply because the melee weapon ended up being the best against them, mainly because the bigger ants can't actually attack you if you loop them and start swinging. At the end of the quest, you're told by some science guy to go take out some ants, which I did and returned to him. I was under the impression that if I did this, he would give me his fancy glasses, but sadly this was not the case. No one trick-or-treats me, no, I do that to other people, so I decided to put some bullets in his head for good measure. Now, the game gave me bad karma for this, and you may think this was wrong or not fitting for the run, but need I remind you this man is responsible for killing dog meat, so I think it's fair. Finally, after all this time, I decided to start on the main story, and started making my way to Galaxy News Radio in order to start the side quest that starts the main quest. In order to actually reach GNR Plaza, I of course have to go through the metro tunnels, which is basically just hell. If you've never played Fallout 3 and not been in the metro tunnels, then you probably don't know what I mean, but these things are so confusing. Not only are a lot of the corridors very repetitive and it all kind of looks the same, but the enemies here are pretty annoying. Luckily, in the first set of metro tunnels you go through, there are only a couple mole rats and ghouls, basically nothing a Chinese officer pistol can't solve. Once you get a bit deeper inside the city though, you're going to start encountering things like super mutants and raiders, which definitely make things a lot tougher. On top of that, when I'm actually on the surface, I experience a lot of lag due to the fact that everything's so tightly packed in, and there are a lot of buildings. Eventually I was able to make it through that and actually make it to GNR Plaza. Now at the plaza you encounter a lot of super mutants, but luckily you have Brotherhood backing you up there, so there really is no trouble. It's not till the very end where you have to deal with a super mutant behemoth that things might pick up. I say might because once again you're being backed up by Brotherhood of Steel personnel, so I wasn't exactly worried. Credit where credit is due, the behemoth managed to kill me once, when it managed to take out every single Brotherhood person in the area, and I was forced to 1v1 it. This ended as horribly as you can imagine, so I had to reload and try again. For only having one red coat protecting me from death, I did surprisingly well when it came to surviving the giant mutant, and eventually I was able to stall long enough for the Brotherhood to take it out. Inside the building, I just talked to Three Dog, he gave me the quest to go to the Museum of Technology, and I didn't do it. Not yet, at least. You see, by this point I decided the challenge wasn't challenging enough. No, I needed more. The only way I could think of making this even more challenging was by getting quote-unquote elves. You see, I'm gonna get temporary companions that could act as my assistants, and what they'll basically do for me is it'll make it harder as I want to keep at least one of them alive till the very end of the game. Now this is hard as most of them have about the health bar of a raider and aren't that tough all things considered. I can imagine this is gonna go great for me, considering I wasn't even able to keep Dogmeat alive even though he has more health than God himself. The first temporary companions I'm going to go for are Red and Shorty, simply because they are in the same building and I figured it would make getting more of them easier. Both Red and Shorty have been captured by super mutants, which obviously haven't been too much trouble for me up until this point, so they shouldn't start being trouble at any time soon. The real trouble in this building ended up keeping Red and Shorty alive, mainly because, well, they are a bit stupid and tend to get themselves killed in the most annoying ways possible. If anything is going to set the pace for the rest of the run, it was this. As soon as I found Red, gave her a couple weapons and freed her, she got scared by a radroach and ran straight into a landmine, instantly killing her. This forced me to reload and do the entire building again, which was annoying, but I think it shows how this is going to go from this point forward. Once I finally managed to get Red downstairs, I just killed every super mutant in the area, freed Shorty and gave him a few weapons and armor. I figured the armored vault suit and the Talon Company Merc outfit would be good enough for both of them, and so I decided to take them on their very first combat test. It was against 3 raiders that had melee weapons, and despite the fact that they had better gear, access to stim packs, and a lot of ammo, both Red and Shorty were killed by them. This made me realize that I needed better armor for them, so I ran around like a headless chicken, picking up power armor off dead Brotherhood corpses. I ended up giving Red a Brotherhood Outcast armor that I found that was in pretty good condition, and once again Shorty drew the short straw, and he got some normal Brotherhood gear in pretty poor condition. Never mind that for now, I needed to go get my last companion, which was Sticky. Now, the road to Little Lamplight was awful mainly because for some reason the area around Smith Casey's garage was so laggy that it was almost unplayable. I crashed about 20 times while recording this video, and 6 of those times were in this area. Once again, I don't want to dwell too much on this, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip straight to Little Lamplight where I recruited Sticky. Luckily, I was able to pass the speech check that makes him shut up right away, so I didn't have to worry about listening to his crap the entire time. Sticky also got a suit of pretty bad Brotherhood armor, but it's okay, they would eventually be getting upgrades. Or at least some of them would at any rate. Now that I had all 3 of my helpers, I decided to put them through the test by taking them to the Museum of Technology. Now getting there was by far one of the worst things I had to do in this run. By now I was determined to get all 3 of them inside the museum, and keep in mind that this whole time I'm just wearing a suit, so I don't exactly have the best protection. Not to mention the fact that while I was expecting to have a firing squad backing me up with both Red, Shorty, and Sticky, it turns out they're not that great of companions. All 3 of them can enter a state where they're fleeing, and basically while that's happening they won't attack, they won't listen, and more importantly they'll run off in a random direction, usually getting gunned down by some random wasteland creature. Out of all 3 of them, Red definitely did this the most, which was mildly concerning considering she had more resources on her than both of the other 2 combined. While I was on the surface, I had a lot of raiders to deal with, which, although they were manageable, the problem was that my old enemy decided to return, and there were tons of landmines scattered about. Although I can dodge the landmines easy enough, my minions don't have such foresight and tended to walk on the landmines and get blown up. Now, despite the fact they are all in power armor, a single landmine could clean house. Remember how I said that Red was the most troublesome out of all of them? Well, I finally realized this when I was inside the metro tunnels, and to be frank, I wanted her dead. This was because when I was almost at the exit, she decided to run away, get herself killed, and I had to reload yet again. Now, like I said, I wanted her dead, but because of the nature of this run, I can't actually kill her. Now, like most people in my hour of need, I turned to religion and found my answer. I just had to rip a page straight out of the Bible, as I realized that no one could blame me for murder if she died on the front lines. Keeping that in mind, I took away her armor, gave her a melee weapon, and gave her old gear to Sticky. This ended up being one of the best decisions I made in this overall stupid run, seeing as Sticky was by far the best out of the three. It was beautiful. I saved him multiple times and he saved me multiple times. He ended up having straight up aimbot with that shotgun, seeing as he could snipe people from across a room despite the fact it was a shotgun. It was so good, in fact, he single-handedly carried all four of us through the entirety of the metro tunnels all the way to the Museum of Technology. Inside the museum, we had our first casualty when a super mutant brute decided to hard focus an assault rifle straight into Shorty's egg noggin. This sent him straight to the workshop in the sky, but I wasn't too unhappy about it because he hadn't made any major contributions to the team yet. After much searching, I ended up finding Three Dogs' doodad and made my way outside the museum. Now I have to actually take this to the Washington Memorial, which was the second worst thing to happen in this run. The super mutants outside were deadly to say the least, and since most of them were carrying hunting rifles, they could take out me or one of my companions with a single shot. The trick to this ended up being sneaking away and entering the Washington Memorial so that all my companions got teleported to me. Once I was at the top, I installed the dish and finally was finished with that quest. Now obviously it's finally time to make my way to Rivet City. The closest place I have to it is the Super Duper Mart, so it means I have to walk for quite a bit. When I got there, I originally thought that my dreams were coming true, as a group of Talon Company mercs almost managed to take out Red. Unfortunately, she didn't actually die, as Sticky of all people came in and blew both of their heads off. This was both a slap in the face for me, but also warmth for my soul. It's like if you put two of your children in a gladiator fight to fight for your love, and your favorite let the other one win even though you rigged it in their favor. I'm not a parent, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Anyways, after that mess, I continued on my way to Rivet City, and I eventually ran into Grandma Sparkle's house, but luckily I'm trained for such situations, so I put a bullet in the back of her head and threw her in the water, as instructed. That was the last meaningful event I had on the way to Rivet City, so before long I was in the giant tub, ready to talk to Madison Lee. I was slightly concerned after Dr. Lee told me that I looked like my father just younger, that when Qui-Gon hopped out of the shadows, he would just be the ancient fish from SpongeBob. As I learned later, that was not the case, and I was sent on yet another wild goose chase. This time I was sent to the Jefferson Memorial, but there's not too much to say because it is just yet another building filled with super mutants, so I battled my way through there before getting to the Rotunda, and then being told my princess is in another castle. Before I made my way to Smith Casey's garage to go into Tranquility Lane, I realized that Red was missing. I'm not even saying that she died, she was just straight up missing. I'm not sure what caused this, I'm gonna assume it's some form of glitch, but she was nowhere to be seen. Jumping ahead of it, I never saw her at any point during this run, and only heard from her way later. I was slightly tempted to reload a save in order to get her back because disappearing would have been a mercy, but sadly I couldn't be bothered. Now obviously it's time for Tranquility Lane, but I've already been by Smith Casey's garage on my way to Little Lamplight, so I kinda just had to fast travel there and deal with any of the surrounding robots. Inside the vault, I went into the weird lounger thing and entered Tranquility Lane. We could add yet another thing to the things I couldn't be bothered to do list, as I didn't really want to go through Tranquility Lane, so I just searched the answer to the puzzle and exited. I did try to punch Betty on my way out, as I was hoping I'd be able to enter the door before she blew me up, but sadly I was too slow and I had to start the whole thing again. Outside the lounger, I just told the old man that I wasn't ready to help him yet, and instead went on a bit of a side quest. I say a bit of a side quest because it's not actually a side quest, at least not yet it isn't, but I still want to do it before I finish this run. I am of course talking about freeing the elves at Paradise Falls, and I figured right now would be the best time to do that. The slavers weren't actually that tough as most of them don't wear armor, and the few that do are fairly manageable. The main issue of Paradise Falls was of course Sticky. Now the thing is, obviously these temporary companions aren't meant to be facing high level enemies, so they don't have the best AI when it comes to combat. The main issue for me while I was here was that Sticky had a habit of running straight into the slavers' camp, which would get him killed almost instantly. I ended up finding the solution to be running to the left as soon as I entered their main camp, and Sticky would usually run in fear into that corner and get stuck somewhere. Even if he was in the fleeing state, this was generally okay, as none of the slavers came into that back little corner, and if they did, well, Sticky had a shotgun, so I'm sure he would have come out on top. I myself didn't struggle too much here, mostly because most of the slavers carry Chinese assault rifles, which is a bit of an upgrade when compared to my normal assault rifle. I'm sure it comes as no surprise to you that the only slaver that gave me any trouble was of course the one with the minigun, but thankfully I have a decent luck stat, so I was able to get a few lucky crits that ended the fight there. Eulogy Jones met the same fate as Tenpenny, by which I mean he was shot to death by an assault rifle. After all the slavers were dead, I freed the elves and left the area. Now that the last of my little side quests are over, I'm ready to get back into the main story, by which I mean I have to go to the Jefferson Memorial so that the scientists could play science. When I got there, I didn't want to actually do all the little science minigames, so they put me on toilet duty so I was stuck walking around the sewers. Joke's on them, no one ever sees the toilet man coming, so when the Enclave arrived I was able to ambush them properly. Now the Enclave soldiers themselves aren't that tough. The only issue is I could say the same about myself. Sure, they can take a bit of a beating, and they aren't the weakest thing I've faced up until this point, but honestly their laser rifles were more than enough to take out me, or worse, Sticky, so I had to be very careful on how I tackled this. Luckily the game eases you into fighting the Enclave, so I didn't actually have to face that many inside of Project Purity. More importantly, however, I was able to kill enough soldiers to fully repair an Enclave power armor, and I gave that to Sticky. The new armor seemed to do wonders for Sticky's confidence, as he actually ran into several rooms and cleared the Enclave out of it by himself, and the armor seemed to be enough to help him survive quite a few lasers. When I got into the rotunda, Liam Neeson tried to say something, but I was too busy trying to steal the ammo out of Colonel Fall's pockets. After that, the world seemed to break all around me, and then I had to obviously escape through the tunnels, sewers, whatever they are. Once again, the Enclave were mostly pushovers over here, as although there are quite a few of them, I could actually take them out pretty quickly with the assault rifle, so I wasn't really in any trouble. That was until the Tesla soldiers started showing up with plasma rifles. Now, the plasma rifles could very easily one-shot me, so I had to be very careful when around them, and I ended up having to prioritize taking them out before anyone else. Luckily, there are only 2, maybe 3 Tesla soldiers out there, so I didn't really have to worry about encountering them too much. After quite a bit of traveling through the tunnels, Garza started dying, but clearly I didn't know I was in the presence of some god, as when I gave Dr. Lee the cure, she bowed down in order to present it to him. I thought this was a little weird, but it got even weirder when Sticky started doing it as well. Other than that, nothing much happened in the sewer, so I was out in the not-so-fresh air before long. On the surface, I'm down 1 parent, but up a suit of power armor, so all things considered, things are going well. I escorted Dr. Lee to the Brotherhood, before learning about all the different flavors of Vault. Then I made my way to Little Lamplight, which I've obviously already been to, so I could go through Murder Pass. Here's where the worst thing possible happened. Sticky can't follow me through Murder Pass. Clearly the man's too powerful to be in this area of the world, so he simply cannot exist there. I tried everything to get him through, by which I mean I tried to get him through for 30 seconds and it didn't work, before giving up. I said my goodbyes, as this may be the last time I saw him during this run, and made my way through Murder Pass. As I've mentioned, super mutants have given me little to no trouble throughout the entirety of this run, so I was pretty confident I'd be able to make it through the vault unhurt. When I actually made it inside, I was greeted by a lot more super mutants than I was expecting, but it's fine, once again I can kill them. I don't want to make this part of the game sound underwhelming, but personally I did not struggle in Vault 87. Sure, there were a lot of mutants, but as I've mentioned multiple times now, and I'm sure you guys are getting annoyed by it, super mutants are not a problem for me. I decided to free Fox and have him get the Gek, because I figured that would be the easiest and right thing to do. This ended up being a mistake, as I ended up having to spend a lot more time than I should have inside that vault waiting for Fox to walk to the Gek. After a very long time, he eventually did make it to there, picked it up and gave it to me. I then got abducted, so that was nice. Inside Raven Rock, I stashed the Colonel before getting sent upstairs so that I could talk to the robot president person. The first floor was easy, as I was able to pass the speech check that allows you to go through the floor freely, so the only trouble was that I got lost in there a bit. On the second floor, the Colonel finally quit his dead-end job, which is good for him but horrible for me. Now all the Enclave wants me dead, so that's nice. Luckily, as I mentioned, the Enclave aren't exactly the toughest opponents. Sure, they're a bit stronger than the super mutants, but honestly, the super mutants made up for that with their firepower. These guys have crap for weapons. By the way, by now I've taken the Longbringer perk. I'm not really sure if that does give a damage bonus to people with bad karma. I thought it did, as the Enclave felt a lot easier the second time I encountered them when compared to the first, but I'm not exactly sure. That's also why everyone's dropping fingers, by the way. On the final floor, I told the president that his plan sucked and that he should go with mine instead. He agreed and then decided to off himself. The Enclave wasn't exactly happy with that, but it's okay, I'll be out of their sights in less than 30 seconds, as by now I was already outside the bunker. Outside, I was half expecting to see Sticky fighting the remaining Enclave with Fox, but sadly I was disappointed. That was before I turned around and saw my knight in shining armor standing right behind me. For his outstanding achievement in excellence, I gave Sticky the reward of a full set of repaired Tesla armor, which meant that he is now a literal tank. I made sure to get out of the way before the bunker exploded so that neither of us died. Afterwards I recruited Fox, mainly because to send him away you have to be extremely mean, and I don't feel like doing that right now. At the Citadel, the heavens informed me that Red was finally burning in hell alongside the entire staff of the VCA Animal Hospital and dubstep music. This made me happy until I realized the next part of the game was the March to the Sea. Not much to say about this, there's a mile of land in front of us and I was dying with every step I took. The only interesting thing that can happen here is that Liberty Prime could break, but that's interesting for you, not for me, because that just meant more work for me if he did. Luckily he didn't and he decided to behave today. Hooray! Now I know you're supposed to be backed up by an entire squad of Brotherhood people, but they were pretty useless seeing as a single car wiped out every killable one of them. The only Enclave soldier that stood a remote threat was some random dude with a rocket launcher, but Liberty Prime felt threatened by his presence, so he threw a bomb at him and he blew up. Inside the memorial, obviously Liberty Prime can't follow you, but I don't really care, I can take out Enclave, so I'm not exactly worried. I think I died once during all of this, and it was because I ended up running straight into a room and getting my head blown off by a plasma rifle. When I finally got inside the rotunda, I ate dog meat and prepared for the final fight. To start, I unloaded a VATS attack onto Colonel Autumn's head, and then let Sticky descend upon him like the short, ironclad vulture he is. While this was happening, I just focused on the guard on the left, while the rest of the team took out the guard on the right. By the time I finished the first guard, the second guard had long since been dead, so it was time to go inside the purifier. I passed the torch to the last competent person on this planet, and entered the rotunda. I slightly ruined the ambiance by opening my Pip-Boy to remember the code, but then I did, entered it, finishing the game and proving yes, you can beat Fallout 3 as Santa Claus. Okay, this was really stupid even by my standards. Character runs usually are the most, I guess, wild of all the runs I do, simply because they always have these absurd criteria, and this one was no different. Still, I had a lot of fun during this run. As a matter of fact, I think this was my favorite video to film ever, so I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. In case you were wondering, this run was so casual because this was my first playthrough of Fallout 3, and I didn't feel like restricting myself too much during it. I still wanted to make it a run, so this is kind of how this run was born. One last thing I'd like to mention is it's a bit obvious, but this run was supposed to come out next week, but I ended up having it finished this week, and the video I was supposed to have out this week, well, it isn't ready. In case you were wondering, all this happened because I'm an idiot, and I try to record 6 different challenge videos at the same time. I'm finally almost done sorting out all that mess, but some of the videos kind of got moved around. Regardless, that's all I have for today's video. If you did enjoy, please consider subscribing, otherwise I'll catch you in the next one.